We're going to move now to the latest on the crisis in Syria and whether this weekend's potentially groundbreaking deal will really eliminate Assad's chemical weapons. A critical report expected from the UN today. The president was cautiously optimistic in my interview yesterday, but he's taking more heat from critics, and ABC's John Carlos tracking it all from the White House.
In tense negotiations with the Russians, John Kerry accomplished a big first step, getting them to agree that Syria must give a comprehensive accounting of all its chemical weapons within 1 week. Despite the tentative deal this morning, the president is still under fire from critics on all sides for how he's handled the crisis.
Gee, imagine that. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Wow, John Kerry got this, and Obama's doing that, and imagine they're still under fire from critics. I can't imagine why. Joining us now to talk about Syria and much more is our friend, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Steve. How are you? Thanks for having me. Glad to be with you.
Always my pleasure. Okay, let's start with Syria, and let's. You wrote a great piece that appeared in the New York Daily News, is where I saw it, about Congress's role. And you addressed such an important issue, and Congressman Peter King told me this, that he doesn't want to weaken the presidency, and that's why he was inclined way back when it first was reported that the president would be going to Congress for a vote. So he was inclined to vote yes, because even though we have a weak president and it's not a great policy, he didn't want to weaken the presidency for future presidents. But you say that's not the Congress's job.
Yeah, look, I don't want to weaken the presidency either. The problem is that in 2008 and 2012, the American people elected a weak man to be president, and we're now seeing the consequences of that. And it's very unfortunate, but we have to distinguish in our own minds between Barack Obama on the one hand and the United States of America on the other. He is a failed president. I mean, I think that's the only conclusion we can draw, and it's not going to get any better for the next 3.5 years. His actions do cost the country. There's no doubt about it. But it's not just this red line on the use of chemical weapons that he drew in a casual way in the middle of a political campaign in 2012. There are a lot of other red lines that have been crossed too. How about the red line against killing American ambassadors that was crossed in Benghazi in September of 2012? The fact is that if we had a new president, a real president, just as when Ronald Reagan replaced Jimmy Carter, it became mourning in America very. We can damage. Congress didn't ask to get in the middle of the Syria issue. They were out in the tall grass somewhere. It was Obama who asked for their opinion, and when the president asks for the opinion of the coordinate political branch of government, it's their duty to give him their honest opinion, not to follow him like robots, but to answer the question he put to him. So I think I don't support the use of force in Syria, and I think that's the way, as a member of Congress, you've got to vote. Nobody wants to weaken the institution of the presidency, but a congressional vote is not the main problem there. The main problem is the person who holds the office of the presidency.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, sticking with Syria before we turn to Benghazi, there was a report in the Washington Examiner that the president has waived a provision of federal law which is designed to prevent the supply of arms to terrorist groups to clear the way for the U.S. to provide military assistance to what they call, quote-unquote, vetted opposition groups fighting in Syria. And this comes, along with a report from IHS Jane's defense analysis that says more than half the rebel fighters are jihadists or hardline Islamists. So, if the American public knew what was going on here, the polls would be even worse for him.
Well, I think that's right. This is a decision, to me, is utterly unjustifiable. If the whole point of the administration saying they're going to supply arms to an opposition that they have confidence shares our values, won't conduct a bloodbath if they prevail, will turn over the Assad regime's chemical weapons when they get hold of them. That's one thing. I don't agree with it, but I understand that as a policy. And they say that they're going to be very careful that the terrorists and the other radicals don't benefit from our assistance. Well, if that's the case, why do they need to sign this waiver? I mean, I think it's an acknowledgement that they don't have a very good idea who they're going to be supplying with weapons, which is one of the principal reasons I think many people don't want to take the risk. I mean, if you want to see the terrorists or radical Islamicists take control in Syria and conduct a bloodbath against Christians, Druze, Alawites, and others who supported the Assad regime, the guaranteed way to make that happen is to aid the opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to Ambassador John Bolton here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Let's shift to Benghazi. We have several hearings taking place up on the Hill tomorrow, much to the chagrin of the Democrats and the media, which is really one and the same. And yesterday we got word from Congressman Frank Wolf's office that his office was informed about a CIA employee who refused to sign a non-disclosure on Benghazi. And you recall a couple of weeks ago we got reports that all the people who had anything to do with Benghazi were being forced under the threat of a retaliation to sign these non-disclosures, saying that they would not talk to the media, they would not talk to anybody about what happened. And this one CIA agent has reportedly refused to sign, and he now has to hire a lawyer. He's been suspended. And at the same time, Republicans are on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Ed Royce in particular, the chairman, are slamming the Obama administration for not actually ever firing anybody over the Benghazi situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Frank Wolf has done such a great job on Benghazi. He's never been deterred. The Obama administration's tried to stonewall him, and he's kept at it, and he keeps turning up these pieces of evidence, like this particular agent who refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement, that simply give the lie to the administration contention that they're being completely transparent with Congress. There's still so much here that we don't know about, and congressional hearings, unfortunately, are not always the best way to try and get these facts out. But I think Congress has got to stay at this through a select committee, as Congressman Wolf has suggested, or other mechanisms. We have got to keep at this and not allow this truth to be suppressed, because it's not just the outrage that 1 year after the killings of our ambassador and 3 others in Benghazi, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. That is a disgrace, and clearly something the administration should be held accountable for. But it is the implications of that failure by the United States, the lessons that our opponents around the world will draw, which is you can strike with impunity at the United States. So getting to the answers in Benghazi so we can correct the mistakes that were made are important, not simply in the case of Libya, but really for U.S. security around the world. Absolutely.
You said a word, security. One final question, sir, regarding the shooting and Aaron Alexis. I had Bill Gertz on, I'm sure you're familiar, national security writer at the Washington Times and the Washington Free Beacon, where he's senior editor, and he just said that the whole security system when it comes to our military bases is just broken.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not familiar with it at many of the bases. I am familiar with it at the State Department, and it's almost broken there. I mean, I used to go into the department all the time, and while people recognized me, they didn't check the trunk of my car. They didn't check the trunks of anybody's car. And we've had instances like this before. I think this particular shooter was mentally deranged, and it focuses, again, the question on why we're so reluctant to commit people to mental institutions when they pose a danger to themselves and others. I understand why you don't want to overdo that, but here's a tragedy with 12 innocent people killed that might have been averted if people had been willing to act on the evidence that was right in front of them about this fellow's difficulties.
Absolutely. Mr. Ambassador, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be with you.
Take care. That's Ambassador John Bolton, ladies and gentlemen. 855-777-9660.